Hello, my friends. Hello, hello, hello. I want to thank you for being with me today as we cover the spell creation workshop. What is spell creation? Spell creation is, very simply, the inflicting of your will on the natural world. It is the means by which you get to influence an unassailable energy, right? It is an irresistible force that pulls you towards your manifestation, towards your goals, towards your outcomes, right? Now, you'd think that a lot of people are dark and twisted and they're invoking demons and they're doing all of the naughty things that all the Christian people say don't do. Well, even Solomon visited the Witch of Endor, right? There is some time that you need to be able to connect to the spirits on the other side. You need to be able to work with them because they can see around the fuzzy edges of what it is we get up to. So it's not something that you should fear. It's not something that you should be in terror of. The stuff that I talk about is quite safe because unlike most types of black magic and sorcery, it does not deal with the conjuring of demons, but specifically the conjuring of elemental forces and the primary building blocks of nature. So as we go through today, and as I talk about different aspects of witchcraft and magic and sorcery and things like that, we are able to go in deep as far as the structuring of a spell, the reason why you build it into ritual, all of the different applications of what it is you can do with your own magic. So as you go through this and as you create, then you have the opportunities to create something endlessly possible, like endlessly beautiful. They're really fun because when you structure your spell right, you have all the ingredients in front of you. The aesthetics are just so, like, it becomes fun. And you can use compound blends. You can do multiple different things with the same kind of energy. So like with this one, right? This is the pot that I use for most of my fire spells. Inside of this is other spells that I've cast, other things that I'm building spirit for and sending out to go do different actions. It's really a fun way to go. Now, so as we go through today, then, we'll get it done, so that way what you're doing, you actually get to cast. By the end of today, my goal is that you not only will understand the framework and the mechanism of the spells, you'll know how to stack them together. So that way what you're doing makes sense. And so when you're casting the thing, it will actually go through and manifest accordingly. Because the more reality we can compress down, the more understanding we know of where that energy is and where that energy is coming from. That's what allows us that deeper connection, that different type of manifestation, that actual visceral response, as if it is our own blessing, our own gift, right? While we create the material components for the outer world, our body is in alignment on the inner world. So it's when those two meet, when your energy meets with the energy of the ingredients that you're using and the spell's environment gets created, all right? We're creating a space of singularity. So if you're going to be casting a circle as if you were a Wiccan or what they, the holy magic circle, right? It's a sacred space. It's a place about 9 feet across. Well, why 9 feet? Well, it's easy. It's 3 by 3 cubed, right? But it's also, funny enough, 9.8 meters per second squared is the rate of gravity. So if you're moving your psychic expanse against the thought forms of gravity, you're going in the opposite direction. You need to be able to compensate for the space of nature. So that's why I use it for the 9.8. But what you do with it could be different. You could use it as a protection spell. You could put it on your house. It doesn't have to be just a circle. You could bless all of your walls, all the corners and the apexes. You could bless the floor. You can do all sorts of stuff with these kinds of techniques. But really getting into spellcraft, really loving on it, really serving people with your methodologies is incredibly important. Because as you conjure, as you create, what you create has a life of its own. So as we go through and we talk about today and what it is that's going to be best served for that next step that you need to take, right? as you create witchcraft, as you create the natural alignment, as you are assimilating different energies up and through your own body, right? We'll start with the foundation. You need to connect with the elements of the earth. When you're about to cast a spell, you need to be able to pull that energy up into you, at least to your waist high. So that way, what you've got going on in your body at the lowest root chakra, right? It's like an earth dress. Like you're pulling it up and putting it on. It is a mantle of power. And then you pull down from above. And you want that to be no less than the crown chakra. So that way you are the pillar between two worlds. Your consciousness is contained within that alignment when you are doing these things. So as you create the spell of union, you pull those energies up and down and around. You bring them back down and you lock them into place using mantra, using conjurations, using whatever it is that will get that union energy established between the above and the below and the within and the without. You're creating that space. You're creating the cross when you are doing this movement, when you are channeling these energies. You are creating a pinhole where your energy exists. And so by doing that, it allows you to definitely create something new. It allows you to specifically know what spell you're conjuring, what spell you're casting, and why it's working. So that as you go through and develop your processes, as you go through and you cultivate the relationship between you and between nature, what you're doing moving forward is you are assimilating the pinhole, right? You are understanding that when you work with that energy, it is the space that goes between. So as it is the space that goes between, you can open it up and make it a gate. A gate is a pathway from this planet to other worlds, to the mental world, to the psychic world, to the infernal or the angelic worlds. But it is that way because you are able to travel from here to there. If you're just doing a summoning spell, it just brings them here. It doesn't allow for you to project your consciousness into their world. You're just bringing them into this one. And by doing that, it's only a one-way ticket for these things. Like they come here and either they get corrupted or they get stuck as a result of not being able to return back. So as we do this, as we get into the details of creating the sacred space, it starts off with the union. And through that, you then bring in the elemental forces. You bring in the earth, you bring in the water, you bring in the air, you bring in the fire, and you bring those up and into the space that you're working on. Why do you do this? It can be something as simple as creating an oil lamp, or it could be something as complex as creating blood magic seals, one for every one of the tattvas. So what you do, why you do it, you can conjure up the elemental guardians, you can conjure up the great beasts, you can do all sorts of things when it comes to what protects and watches with you. But you're also pulling into it an alchemic state. You're bringing into your space that which is like you, but fiery, that which is like you, but earthy, that which is like you, but airy. Like what is watery? What is your nature when you're interacting with these kinds of elements, when you interact with these kinds of forces, so that what you do, how you do, and why you're doing it allows you to connect deeply on the one-to-one, right? How does it allow you to connect solidly between what you're up to and the elemental world, right? We know that through the study of the periodic table, there's a bunch of elements and it's a lot more complicated than just the traditional four, right? But that's okay, because that's not what we're not just after that. We're specifically after the connective thread that's interwoven between the elements. So that way we can start with 4 and then it becomes the 64. And by the 64, it becomes the 10,000 things. All right. So we're staging it out, but we're starting very, very small. We're focusing it down very, very small. One group of herbs, one single release, one single intent per release. So over the last week, we've been building the spell a day problem, right? One spell a day off of one list of herbs. How many different spells can I make using one different kind of herb? Like one different arrangement, one type of herbs in our collection, right? And I've been doing that and I've been testing that. And it's the way that those will get stacked together and form a conversational piece of magic. So it's the subsequent steps. It's the prerequisite magic. So what you do before you have to actually cast the spell you want, what are the other ingredients in there? What is going to be the supplemental forces that you have to contend with? What do you have to do to make the candles just the right way? What do you have to do to make the oil just the right way? What about the incense? What does it have to be? What do your designs look like? Are they going to be carved in metal? Are they going to be carved in wood? Are they going to be hand drawn with ink that you make and you create? Because at each different level, you have those different applications of what the power represents. And so as you pull the techniques of power through yourself and through the work that you do, you're able to create something different. You're able to create a compound arrangement of something entirely new that allows you to take what was and make it what could be, to get you that manifestation, to get you into that spell that you're creating. So that way what you do serves not just you, but it balances out the creation of the world that you're serving with that spell that you're creating. So I promise that we're going to go right through this, and I look forward to working with you today. My name is Brian Levering, and I have been a sorcerer for 2 decades, 20 years now. And I've had a chance to work with some of the best in the industry as far as dedicated to their craft. And I've had a chance to work with some fringe communities that are secret societies that, you know, it's part of the deal. So working with this information, compiling this information, reading and researching all of these things, it comes from a very devoted place for these energies. It's a priesthood. It is a craft for priests. Like if you serve heaven, if you serve the divine, if you serve the idea of God, that which is where you are not, and that which wishes to be where you are, it's in that space. The best way I heard described as what is good is ripe. And so what is not ripe has the potential to become ripe. But if it's over ripened, it becomes rotten, right? Like you need to have it just in that sweet spot of becoming ripe. It is seeking mentorship. It is always learning, seeking growth, seeking development, so that as we grow, as we create, as we change the way that the natural order goes, at least in relation to what it is we're up to, we know that we are compressing the singularity and we are firing up the divine spark within us, so that when we put the two together, we create divine manifestations. We create theurgy, right? We don't have to call on God the Father or God the Mother or God the Child or God the Sister or God the Brother. Like there's different families of gods, right? Like there's different orders of where there is a divine aspect. So pulling these energies through, pulling these energies into your work directly is a huge part of it, right? So that what you do, why you do, and how you do, it allows you to go through and interact with all of the different applications of this stuff, so that while you're working with these energies, you have the means by which you can cause your manifestation to happen, right? Because what you know of the earth and what your body is and what your actions are, that's what connects you to the earth. That's what connects you to that environment, is the physical response in that environment. The air is the behavioral response. The water is the emotional response. And the fire is the catalyst through which it happens, right? So like if you were there with family during the holidays, you could wind up hating on your family at least up until Christmas, or you didn't have a good relationship with your family or whatever, or you did have a good relationship, but something happened where it's your contact is severed for some reason. All right. And so through that, through the application of that, we have to be careful of not being so one-sided, but we have to be able to come to temperance. We have to be able to see around the fuzzy edges. And so working with a spirit, working with a energetic force, especially when we cultivate, game-changing, straight up game-changing. So by doing that, by creating that, you know, we are able to tap into those energies. We are able to cultivate those energies. So as we're building, as we're conjuring, as we're summoning, the fire takes on a life of its own. The spirits within the fire are released. They get to go out, and because they came through the gate of the ingredients and go out into the world, they get to go and make the world as it needs to be, right? So what we do in small form becomes bigger, becomes wider, becomes larger. So we are creating from that. And so that the fire becomes our guide, right? It is the lamp that lights the way. We call upon the way to open before us, right? And so that brings us into the gate magic. So we already understand that we have the union between the heaven and the earth. We understand that we have the union of the elemental natures. Now we have to open the gates. What are the gates? Like I said, they are the thing that connects us to the planes, to the planets, to the other worlds, and allows us and those energies to freely come and go between these energies. So that what we do and why we do it, it allows for that manifestation to come to pass in a reality tunnel. Now, if you watch the main channels, I've got more videos, his videos talking about Hyperion thought, right? Where it is the divine light, as it were, right? It is the everything is mind, everything is reality, but it is the structure of the mind in its form. That's not entirely wrong, right? Everything is frequency and wave patterns, as this is a universe of mathematics, right? So using your thoughts to compel the right mathematics, using the mathematics to describe your thoughts is a difficult task, but it's one that I endeavor to continue my life's pursuit towards. And so when I start talking about these types of formulations, it's because if it can be expressed in a math problem, it can be tested in different ways. It can be expressed and tested so that way under certain conditions, it works better than it does under other conditions. And it's our job to figure out what is the right conditions. What are the best use scenarios for the information that we are delivering? What is the second best? What is the third best? What is the fourth best? And so on and so on and so on, right? So that way, what we know how to do, we are able to unpack and stack up accordingly. So that what we're doing, why we're doing it, how we're doing it, all of that becomes ingrained in what we're doing. So while we've done it, while we're curating it, while we are crafting that application, it gives us details. It gives us raw information, right? And this is the principles of ubiquity. You get too much information, right? You have to then sort out your information between information that is useful and information that is quantity. So quality versus quantity. What is the quality? What is the quantity? From that, what are the aspects? What are the ingredients that you know, right? So as you're building out your steps, you're creating an order to them. What day of the week did you cast it on? What season was the zodiac in? What part of the planet are you on? What time of day did you do the spell? What time of the night did you do the spell, right? What is the relationship between where you're located on Earth to the constellation body in space? Like, draw it out on the map. It's like you're here. There's the 7 or 8 rings that we use, or I use, for planning and plotting the mathematical principles, right? It's because it's the Earth in relation to the sun, in relation to the planets that are on the other side of that relationship. So it might be from the Earth to get to the gate of the sun, or it might be from the Earth to get to the gate of the moon, to get to the Mercury, to get to the Mars, whatever is behind us, pulling that energy through us and into the future, right? So if we're pulling from the foreground, that is a yin pull, and it's a push from behind. So we have to stimulate the behind energies to pull it up into the forward. We have to pull the front of us energy into the middle. So as you do that, you can plan out based on the ingredients. I go through lists and lists of ingredients that are divided up between the masculine and the feminine. The masculine will be the projector. It'll be the push. So you need to stimulate the energies that are coming from space from behind. You need to push those into the earth while you're doing your spell. You need to pull into the earth those arrangements when you're doing your spell. So what you do is you're creating that singularity. You're creating those gates. You're opening up the path of heaven. You're opening up the path of the earth. You're opening up the path of the spirit and the application of the path of the human, right? So that as they come together in your ritual space, in that singularity in front of you, within you, above you, and below you, it is a very specific process and a very specific relationship to the Feng Shui fate-changing work of the collective cosmos, right? And you can go to the website like planetstoday.com, or you know, that it actually tracks where we are in relationship to that energy. So here, for example, I will demonstrate planets today. Planets today. So this will provide a map that gives the application exactly what I'm talking about. So as we share the screen here, so we're listed up here on Earth, okay? If I have a gate conjuration that needs to be pulled from Mars, well, Mars has got Venus, Mercury, and the sun in my way. So I have to use the yin ingredients of Venus, the sun, Mercury, and Mars. While at the same time, I'm using from behind, I'm using the moon in its yang form, right? Jupiter would be in its yang form. Saturn would be in its yang form, because again, I have to pull those energies or push those energies into the earth. So I have to pull one way and get the spiral going another, right? Like it's shifting that application. So as you're working from a celestial perspective, that's where you would line up your ingredients. That's where you would line up your anchors or set up your arrays when you're working on these energies to be able to pull that power into your microcosm, into that pinprick state that goes into the jar for fire. So that when that fire burns, it's connecting you to those energies that are moving through our heavens, that are moving through our collective galaxy at the same time. So when we're working with those, we have supplemental energies of what the applications of the astrology forces are, like the behaviors of what is of the planet and that zodiac. They change, right? There's an in-depth course that I've got that goes through that, which I'll post a link later for people who want to purchase. So that way they get the opportunity to study that, and then they get the opportunity to see what's going on in these forms. So that way what they're doing, how they're doing it, they get to use the keys of heaven, essentially. They get to unlock the gates. They get to create with this material. So that way, as they're pulling celestial energies into microcosmic states, into people, into their spirit, into their mind, they're using the greater energy to push the smaller energy, right? But we're doing it in a way that doesn't call on Jesus. We're doing it in a way that doesn't call on the higher spirit. We're doing it in a way that doesn't call on any critter that's been created. These are just raw elemental states, the behaviors of those states affecting you, and those behaviors that are affecting the natural world as a result of what you've done. So again, it's not about pontificating the holy orisons, right? It's like, I'm not trying to evoke the Holy Ghost in my work. Could, but it's not necessary. The gods can stay where they're at, the spirits can stay where they're at, and you can work with the energy in the way that you need to by pulling it from the gate itself, right? By pulling that tunnel of energy from here to Mars, or from here to Mercury, or from here to Uranus, or wherever it is that you're pulling it from, right? You have the means to do so, so that you understand what you're doing is in a map of time, right? It is in motion. As it is in motion, you also then have the arrangements of the zodiac. So that's what changes time, one state to the next, 1 hour to the next, one behavior to the next, right? Every one of the zodiac rules each sphere of these planets in time. As such, what we're able to do with them and what we're able to get as a result of that, we can get really specific in our manifestations. So that way, how we help people, what we're doing to help people, what we're doing to shift the behaviors of those energies, we're doing it on a cosmic scale. So it's not just working with one spirit. It's not just working with one God. It's not just, it's working with the entire whole of creation in a single spell. Every time you cast a spell, every time you do a work. That's why the anchorage for the planetary, for the astrological, for the elemental, for the 9 world directions, right, is because we can compress those through simulacra, right, the sympathy relationships. So those forces that are traditionally ascribed to what is the Northeast, is Asgard, what is the Midgard, what is, the center, those are the types of things that we can pull in based on these relationships, based on these understandings of those relationships. So that as you get to go through and as you get to make and as you get to unmake what is your collective reality, what is it you're trying to do for your clients or your friends or your family when you're creating these spells, that's a means by which you get to do that. Okay, so now that we've covered, this is how you work the gates, this is how you set them up, this is how you do the math. It's all in relationship to where we are on the earth and where are the other supplemental forces that are in relation to what it is we're trying to pull off, right? So in this configuration, if we're just going to be using the sun as our launching point, and that's going to be our gate of primary origin, then it would be what is in between us? What is it between us and the earth, right? Between us and the sun, rather, right? It's like it's Venus, right? So it'd be comes out of the sun. So it's yang sun, yin Venus, yin earth, comes out of Mars, comes out of Mercury, comes out of Saturn, comes out of Jupiter. Those would be yang because they're pushing. They're pushing into Venus. They're pushing into Earth. They're pushing into the moon, right? Because you're pulling something in instead of projecting something out. So again, it just depends on what kind of spell you need to use, what kind of work you're going to do as a result of what it is your spell requires of you. So that's how that part of the spell setup works, right? And so when you're making those configurations of the elemental and physical anchors, you compensate for these energies. You don't necessarily have to know exactly where they're at, because if you include those anchor vessels, you can bypass the need to know their exact location, just that they are invited and embodied within the work you're doing. Like they exist in your spell because they exist in heaven, right? In the heavens, the celestial order outside of the earth, right? I call anything that's in space or above space, if it's not on the planet Earth, it's in heaven. That'd be the moon, that would be Jupiter, that would be Mars, that would be space aliens from across the galaxy. Doesn't fucking matter. That is heaven. That is the heavens. That is the off-world that we are pulling into our small form of the world. So this will allow us to figure out, okay, that's going to be the planetary arrangement that we need to pull in. But we also need to figure out in relationship to that, right? What is this season that we're in? Because the seasons change. Which planet and which astrological force take over during those shifts. It is different in spring than it is in summer, than it is in autumn, and it is in winter. So as we go through those cycles and as we go through the changes, the spring equinox, the summer solstice, the autumn equinox, and the winter solstice, right? All of those cycle back around. All of those create the flow of the earth. So as one gate opens in the north hemisphere, the other aspect of it opens in the southern hemisphere. So if you're conjuring something in the northern hemisphere, say in the US, right? And you're got friends in Australia and it's Halloween in North America, it's May Day in Australia, right? Those are the opening of the gates, the intentional opening of the gates. The energy moves through the earth. So you're creating that through line for the entire planet. So if you've got somebody down there, you can connect the diagonal energies, right? So you can create that new axis point. So it will function on an axis of how you get that energy into, if my finger is the center of the earth, that energy into that ritual space, right? And do they need to, are you pulling it through the bottom of the planet up, or are you pulling it down? Like, it just depends on your physical relationship to the space within where you're doing your casting, right? So that you can apply best practices in knowing where your energies are coming from and knowing what they're going to do when they get there because of the behaviors that they have, right? So like I said, you can get really myopic into detail of what happens when the sun is influencing Aries, or when the sun is influencing Mars, or when the sun is influencing Capricorn, or when Jupiter is influencing. It gets really complicated. But it's that relationship that you can observe, that if these behaviors are happening, you can figure out, okay, well, I need to move and balance out these other behaviors in the meantime. I have to unfuck the energy. So I need to do a spell of temperance. If it's too fiery, I have to do a spell of water. If the behavior is not what you're looking for it to be, then you need to figure out how you'll make it be that way, right? You need to figure out how it will work. So now that we know that the placements of the astrological and planetary anchors are important, we now know that the timing of those things is important, right? Time and place. We're creating the behaviors. It's the astrological, that's time, that's behavior. Day of the week. Which day is what planet is going to be the ruler of those energies predominantly, right? So it's day is moon every few days is the sun, every few days is the day of the week, right? But because you're focused on what day of the week is doing what kind of spell, you should be doing that thing that day. In your week, you have things to do and plan. In your applications of what you go through on a weekly basis, what you do on Monday should be a reflection for the week, so that way you've got everything in order. On Tuesday, it should be a reconciliation of the mind, so you go through with all of your actions. By Wednesday, you should be in communication with whatever you need to do for the rest of the week or to set up for next week. By Thursday, you should be doing something that wraps up and rules the schedule that you've got, so that by Friday you have something that impacts your life. And Saturday you can do something that's transformative, and Sunday you can do something that illuminates you. That's what that should be doing. That's why you should be doing and scheduling your work and structuring your work on those days in that pattern. Because when you're pulling forward energy from behind or what's coming next, there is a pattern, there is flow, there is application to it. So when you're creating spells that you're stacking on top of each other, right? You spend 7 days building 7 different spells. All of the spells lead up so that you've created a compound blend. By that compound blend, it can be then compounded into other things. It can stack and overlay, and it can become a singular energy or a singular tunnel into that energy, so that everything else around it gets caught up. And by it being caught up, it allows for those things to affect essentially the world really quickly, because there's so much information. There is so much quality of information, the quantity of information that's there, right? It's the density of information, and it's all in direction of that thing you're trying to accomplish. So now that you've worked through the elements, now that you've worked through the time, now that you've worked through the meaning of what it is you're doing to set up the spells, this is prerequisite magic, right? This is the shit you have to do before you get to the spell, right? This is why I've been trying to understand the very foundation of what magic gets to be. Because if we can understand how we set the table, we know who's coming to dinner, right? We know that if we're doing an offering to a divinity, if we're doing a summons of a god, or if we're doing a summons of a spirit or a jinn or a daemon or a whatever guiding force we're using in that moment, in that time, we know, because the energies for it to manifest are there. We put them there. We built them there. It's not a, oh, I think it'll work or I think it won't work. No, you put that shit there. You might not have put it in the right order, but you put it there. So if you didn't put it in the right order, like which ingredient does what and for what purpose, you're going to fuck it up. All right. Don't do that. Try not to anyway. That way you don't corrupt the thing you're working on and it doesn't get pissed off and try to eat you. So speaking of that, do not, and I repeat, do not desecrate the dead for ingredients. Don't do it. Don't do it. Do not do it. It is bad. You get your graveyard dirt, be happy with that. If you get your bones on Amazon or on osteological supplies, bless them, thank them, use them then, because they're already being used in the medical field. They're already being of use. Those are the bodies that were selected for use, right? So those arrangements and ingredients you can use, but don't go digging in graveyards. Don't go uprooting the dead. That's bad. So now I've said yin energy and yang energy, the active, the passive. So those ingredients for the planet Earth Yang is horehound, yin is vervain. Air, yang is mistletoe, yin is yarrow. Fire, yang is cedar, yin is rose. Water, yang is chamomile, yin is dittany of Crete. Sun, yang is cinnamon, yin is sandalwood. Moon, yang is myrrh, yin is orris. Mercury, yang is lavender, yin is valerian. Saturn, yang is mullein, yin is yew. Jupiter, yang is juniper, yin is black nightshade or henbane. It's different than woody nightshade and it's not belladonna. Venus is yang, golden seal, yin, dittany of Crete. Mars is yang, dragon's blood, yin is orchid. Now, you can use them in their different states, but those are the basic ingredients that you can use through which you conjure up your energies. So for those that are stayed with me at the end, you get a free copy of this. So that way you have that available to you. And it'll go into more in-depth applications of what is for the celestial alignment. But this is how we plot and calculate the celestial alignment that's talked about in the book. So when you get to this page, remember theplanetstoday.com, because that's where it's at, right? Like that's what's going to help you help. What in the relationship are you to that planet? Because when you start shifting your focus away from the sun being your primary source of energy for your magic, and you start pulling on the gate of Venus or the gate of Jupiter or the gate of Mars, then you have to figure out, okay, well, is it daytime for you on the earth or is it nighttime for you on the earth? And if it is, what's standing in the way of you and Jupiter? And then what is all the other energy, right? Your primary energy is the yang force of Jupiter. You need that to be in your spell. Everything else is yin because it's all supporting energy, right? So it doesn't have to be solar located. It can be celestial body located too. So that can be changed. It's all very, very mutable. But once you understand where it is you're pulling from, where you're pulling from it, you have the means by which to channel that energy into that specific moment, channel that force into that specific application of force. So there is how to set up those spellcrafts. That's how to get that nature of behavior that you're looking to engender in your application, right? Because then you have your latitude and then you've got your longitude coordinates, where you are located on the earth in relation to where those celestial bodies are on the earth. Like, do you have to pull it through the earth in a yin state, or can you just pull it down from its yin state above your head? Like, do you have to make it move through dirt, or is it just in the air, right? Is it to your left or is it to your right? These are the things that you have to ask yourself as you set your spell up, because these do matter. The behaviors matter, because if you get it all screwy, the energy won't form right, the spirit will be pissed off, and then you'll have to make amends. And nobody wants to have to make amends, because usually that involves doing something really gross. So when we think of, like I said before, the different directions, the gates of heaven, the gates of the earth, the human gate, and the ghost door, right? So the line of the heavens above your head, right? Anything that's above you is the heaven. Anything that is in line with you but not physical is the ghost. And anything below you is the earth. And so as we call on the earth, as we call on the ghosts, as we call on the humans, because you're human, you are alive, you are a body, you have that application that you can work with. You have those things that you can do and develop and apply, right? So it's through that application, through that development, that what you're doing is engaging, what you're doing is applicable. So as you're creating these things, you're going through and you're developing the relationships between what is and what is not the kind of manifestation you're looking to cause, right? You're siphoning it out, you're splitting it apart, you're taking it and dissecting it. You know that the energies of heaven are going to be the yang ingredients that you need to use to pull down those planetary forces. Those yin ingredients of the earth, you need to have support and hold those in balance, right? So if you're using yang heavenly energy and yin earthly energy, you can balance them and blend them both in your energy for the ghosts or human. depending on which state you need them to be in. So as you project your spells outwards through an elemental release, then you'll have the means to do it. And so that gets us into what we really should talk about is considerations on what makes a spell work, right? It's not just, oh, I'm going to light a few candles and hope for the best. That's not how it's done, folks. So we have to take 4 considerations. 4 is just the starting place, by the way. So 1, we have to have a moment of the experience formed with the spell's ingredients. These are the intermediaries of the greater forces, which I just went and described, right? And so through their conversation with the ordering of their inclusion, so the law of narration, what order they go in is the same reason why you would pull yang ingredients or yin ingredients of the celestial orders into your work, as well as the alignment to these directions where the alignments are most suitable. So in that case, if you're pulling from the sun and the sun is actually in your west at that time of day, you line your ingredient list up to the fucking sun. You don't stick to the east. You line it up to the sun. You line it up to the stars. You know where Jupiter is above you. You start there. That's your starting point. That's where your ritual circles begin. And this sets the stage for the type of spell that will release when the moment is conjured. So when you're basically channeling that energy down into the bubble that is your ritual space, by the time your bubbles go, you have everything you need. Now, the experience of the moment when you are casting this, right? You are having a moment with the forces that be. While you do that, please be aware that what you're creating, what you're conjuring, why you're conjuring it, all of these things come into harmony, right? What is your emotional state? What is your thoughts? What is your feelings? Because when you connect those to the ingredients, you've created the union between you and all of the energies that exist outside of you that are not yourself, but are still important and imperative as far as who and what you're doing, right? Like you put your entire self into this spell every time you cast a spell, right? That's how they work. That's what you should be doing. If you're not, go back to the drawing board and figure out what's going to get you in your spellcraft. Because without that, without action on your part, it's going to be a really shitty experience, because you could either get swept up in the changes that the thing will make, or you won't have anything happen. Worst case, nothing happens. Best case, if you fuck it up badly enough, nothing happens. Worst case, shit actually works and it screws you a lot. Okay, so that is what we hope to avoid. So by doing that, you experience the moment. What is it that connects you to the spell will be the same kind of thing that connects your target to the spell. Okay, so if you're working on somebody else, if you're doing client work and you're giving them the means for manifestation, right? So you've already done all of your prerequisites. You know where the things are calculated from, the arrangements are from, the development of those arrangements as it progresses, right? So what we do, how we do it, why we do it, where we're doing it matters, because again, it's that singularity and compression, right? All of those behaviors, when they are expressed by your target, that's when the spell kicks in, right? Because you're creating an irresistible force along which behavior is pretty much a guarantee action point. They will behave this way because the energy around them moves this particular way, moves with these particular features. So that way, what you conjure, what you create is moved by those things. So it's inviting that energy that causes those changes into that person's life, into that state, into your experience, through your experience, by your emotions. So you are deeply as connected to that spell as they are. But as a result of that, what ends up happening is that you'll lose focus, or you'll get right to the edge and then, I'm not good. I'm not going to release it. I'm not going to do these things, right? And you hold it back. You stunt the growth. You stunt the spell. So the energies can't stabilize. The environment goes fucky and everything falls apart. So you have to finish what you start. You have to go through all of the steps so that you can do proper experimentation. So that way, what you create and what you engender to create in other people's lives, in your life, and all of the different ways that this stuff goes, you actually get a really good understanding of what that moment is. So when you go back to your notes and you complete your spell records, right, you have that available. You do that stuff. You've got those things, right? And so we move into the third step. This is all in the pre-planning stage of what you are wanting the experience to be, right? So what is the loop of behavior? What starts the spell for them? What ends the spell for them? What's going to be that thing which kicks this fucker off in the right direction so it doesn't get out of line? What's going to be the action that they're going to have that's going to start this shit off in the right way, right? You know what it's going to do. They don't know what it's going to do. They have to act a certain way in order to get it to do what it needs to do. So you have to figure out, what is that condition? What are those conditions, right? It's like somebody's going to try to send a demon after me, or daemon, or critter, one of the conjured monsters, right? One of those fuckers. They send it after me. I'm like, no, motherfucker, mine, right? My wards will collect it, right? And then turn it back on its owners. So that's how it works, is like there are conditions. It gets sent to me, it stops, I then invert it, and it goes wild, right? So all that energy that individual used to summon up something nasty and to send it after somebody can be inverted against them, along with a whole lot of other shit. So when I say the words "don't be evil," it is quite literally, do not be evil with your spellcraft. I am not teaching these things for you to go and abuse them. I'm teaching you these things so that you can go and help people to build out your theurgic or thaumaturgic practices. So that which is divinely inspired, or that which is inspired by you trying to work with nature in order to accomplish set goals, set up like opportunities with people, and explore and experiment your relationship with nature. So that as you come together with these energies, it works to your benefit. It works to the world's benefit. It works to everybody who interacts with you, gets the benefit of your energy, right? You're not a parasite, you're a producer, right? So you produce energy. You are an energy generator, right? You are the cosmic battery of what is the unity of yourself expressed in your physical form, where your actions affect those of nature. So that as you go through and you have these natures, you're applying these natures, you're doing these things, you're building these natures, right? That's where you get to go next. That's what you get to do with those behaviors, the ideas and the moment, right? And that's where that loop comes in. It's like, what is the loop's start? What is the loop's end? How do they come back together again? So that way the spell keeps cycling. So that way their behaviors may not be exactly what you want the first time around. Well, the energy is still in play, so it's going to try again. It's going to cycle again. It's going to loop again. So that way the spell isn't broken. It's just going to shift its form. So it didn't go and find its way in one way. It'll continue to look for a way in. You know, I always like to think about it like Jesus trying to knock on your door for your heart, right? Like, what's going to allow that into your heart, right? What will be the thing that allows the spell into your life? When it comes knocking, it's either going to knock on the door or blow your house down. You got two choices. Go with the flow or drown with it, right? Like, it's an irresistible force. You're conjuring celestial magic into physical experience, intangible divinity into physical experience, creating a singularity, creating a loop, pulling through the gates, through the elements, through the behaviors, through all of those aspects. Right? So that's the set of the loop. So you know the moment that you want to create, you know the experience you want to create, you know the behaviors that is required, and the last is you need to separate the meaning. Separating the meaning means do exactly what I said by going through that list. What is the day? What is the time? What is the location of you in relation to the planets? What are the planets' location in terms of our relationship to us? So as we go through and we work with the planets today, we have the means by which we can pull our spells into manifestation. Now, the fun part, getting into how to conjure the magic. How do we do that? Okay, so I've talked about the union spell. And the union is a sort of wedding between you and a natural force. It can be you that is doing something for a deity or under the prayerful application of a deity, right? So in my case, I work with Themis, natural law, Justica to the Romans. So with her and that, it is primordial nature. It's not man's nature. What I deal in has nothing to do with what critter is most sentient. It has to do with what is formed in nature. So is it the mind of the rock? Is it the mind of trees? Is it the mind of plants, animals, people, every organism, living and non-living? It's that energy, right? And so when I invite that energy into my work, pulling it up, bringing it out, those sorts of things, that is going to be what I have to separate meaning for. It's what am I using the bones for? What am I using the stones for? What am I using the animal parts for? What am I using the ingredients for? Right? Make a list. Go through it. This is why with this workshop today, I've already created 5 other spells every day of the week since I started that project of the last parts of 2021, right? So I'll have 42 different spells cast from 6 different lists of herbs. Sometimes the herbs will repeat themselves on different lists. Sometimes they don't. It's just a project to demonstrate and to test and to get people engaged in this work. So that way, as you move forward with me in the mentorship, in the models of this kind of sorcery and this kind of training and stuff like that, as we move forward, it will be the hands-on practical applications of what it is I just talked about, right? So we'll bring the herbs together, we'll bring the spells together, and we'll cast them together. So if you are making the spells the way that I make the spell, great. If you can do something different, awesome. But you should have 7 spells by the end of the week. 7 different ways to use one ingredient list to show you the versatility of your understanding of what you can do when you apply the law of narration. Because what ingredient goes in, what is it responsible for, how it relates to the entire blend, and then what that blend will be used for. That is the separation of meaning. That is step 4, right? So by understanding the experience that you want, the moment that you're trying to create, the behaviors that are required for that moment, and the meaning that that moment has to you, to your ingredients, all of that, those are your 4. That's how you build a spell. That's how you create and you shift and you basically entrain, using the physics term entrainment, the stronger energy pulls the weaker energy into the behavior, right? It's what gets sucked into the vortex, so to speak. So this is how we do it. This is how we get the ruling subject with the desired day of casting, with the ingredients, all into union. That's it. Now, this can take many forms, right? It can take elemental forms, it can take behavioral forms, it can take energetic forms. What is the form that the spell needs in relation to what it does and produces, right? So if you're going through and you're creating a simple candle spell, understanding what planets are involved, what herbs you're using, what planets those have attachments to, what sacred journey or what story that those plants were involved in that made them useful for magic. It's like, why is spikenard used in divinity? Is because it was used to wash the feet of Jesus, right? Why is Althea used in manifestation magic? Is because that was what was the wood that lined the walls of the Temple of Solomon, right? Acacia wood. So like, you've got things that have long-standing sacred traditions, like the yew tree. It connects you to the other world. It connects you to the ancestors. You know, it depends on what culture you're from, right? So when you think about those ingredients and with respect to other cultures, that know the stories, that work with them in the deeper ways. As you do this, as you create this, you can pursue different types of outcomes, right? You can just create spells for fun. You know, that's part of the process, is what do you want to try to do without having to do a whole bunch of shit, right? So that's why if you make up and batch them out, so like with this one, right? This is to change the mind of others, to cause interior mental changes, right? So if I take a couple of drops of this stuff and I add it to another spell, I've got something that can help me change somebody's mind. And so it's thinking of that type of arrangement, thinking about that kind of use. So it goes beyond just the singular ingredient that's been made into a tincture and becomes a collective of ingredients that become one energy, one culmination of a blend, one oil, one tincture, one powder, right? It's greater than the sum of its parts, because it can do all of the things that supplement what that powder needs to do, what that behavior needs to do. So as you make things like Goofer Dust, if you make things like the zombie powder, if you make things like your conjure powders or amplification spells and things like that, and you start including minerals into it, as you start including animal parts into it, as you start including other toxic, baneful poison herbs, you know, you want to be careful with your doings, but it really does change it up. So that's why you want to structure your spells in that way. So as you get creating them, you get the means by which you get a whole lot of experience with it, right? So as you break it down, right, and we get into a lot more detail in the next couple of pages. So what is the outcome? What will you do for others with using this method, right? That's a question of ethos. What are you going to do with this spell now that you have it? What's its function? Is it going to be something that sits in a spell book for you just to make you look more fabulous, that you've got all these books full of the spells you've never cast? Or are you going to be applying it in any and every form that you've got? And then your spell books are just the record of what it is you've done and what it is you're doing. So that way it becomes a history book of your own practice, right? And then what can you explore with these types of virtues? What types of behaviors, right? What will require you to trust that path that you're on, so that as you do that, as you create that path, you have the understanding of those experiences. So it's not, it's not overwhelming. It's not scary. It's not a bad thing. It's just a thing that is. So you trust the energy, you trust the nature, you trust the behaviors of those planets in action, of that energy in form, so that by its formation, it creates exactly what you want, or at least as close to what you want as possible. Because getting exactly what you want is like shooting a fish in a bucket with a BB gun. You might hit it, you might not. Or you can take the napalm, drop it in, and then poof, no more fish, right? So you do not want to overdo everything. Temperance, balance, subtle, let it manifest. If it doesn't work, or if it doesn't work the way you want, add a little bit extra, add a little bit and modify it, right? Don't be afraid to modify your spells after you've cast them, after a couple of days, if you don't like the results that you're getting, right? What is it that you do to engage this patterning in your own body, right? What conjuration do you need? There is a concept called evoking the tower that demonstrates the lineage of what it is we are attached to, right? Like, where is our soul coming from? Where is our gnosis? The stuff that we know is fact, but we can't tell anybody because we sound like a fucking lunatic, right? So I use the conjuration, I am a lord of the land of shadows, by the black fire come forth, or something like that, right? So for me, I met Nox. I learned how to control the black fire. I learned how to make it burn inside me without being burned by it, right? Cultivating that relationship with the dark side of life. I learned how to do it with the light fire as well. So you can hold both in balance, the dark in one hand, the light in the other, right? And so as you're going through and you're casting your spells, as you're creating your spells, All right. What is it that you do when you engage that patterning in relation to what it is you're doing? The more emotions that you have, the more depth you can get. The more understanding of what emotions are for you, the more fuel to your fire, right? So that way, when you create a spell, when you go and you put all of your into something, it goes and it starts and it burns and it moves and it wiggles or it grows, right? Whatever it is you're doing, whatever it is you've done, that emotional state that you're in will determine, are you using black magic, dark magic, light magic, white magic, right? Those are separate, all very different things. And it really pisses me off when people are like, oh, black magic is evil. Not always. Sometimes black magic is just the self attunements. It is what you do to fix your shadow state. Dark magic is the interaction between critters. Dark sorcery is the understanding that there is non-friendly shit out in the world that you can be friends with ish, but that aren't gonna fuck your cookies out if you don't feed them every Friday or whatever. Like, black magic is you're specifically out and intentional to hurt something, intentional to destroy something. In this case, this Black Friday, I'm out to use magic and the conversation thereof to destroy the myths about it. So that way, those people that are engaging with me, those people that are engaging with this, have the opportunity to learn how to use a spell simply, easily, and they get to apply it by the end of today. Like I said, we're going to start making spells here in a minute. So that being said, we are going to go into step 2 a little bit deeper, creating the recipe. So you must become proficient in seeing the layers of your spell, right? Every sentence your spell speaks has a relationship to an ingredient, either a planet, an element, or a star. And so when you understand that, you can use those energies in a different way. So the dead matter of the plants that's before you are no longer dead plant matter. They are the physical emanation of that energy on Earth. It doesn't matter how old the dead plant is. It doesn't matter how fresh the dead plant is. It is the embodiment of that celestial force in a physical form that you're grinding up and you're putting into use by either fire, by the water, scattering it to the wind, planting it in the earth, right? So that's what you do, right? Bless all of your stuff, okay? So when you're done, animate it, give it life. The spell of animation is in the Grimoire of Arts. So this here, I've been teaching this material for about 10 years. Like this was written in 2011, published in 2012, and then made bestseller in its category, thankfully enough to all the people that I was with. And one of my readers asked me to teach his mom my method of magic. So that's when my practices shifted from just all knowledge, all information, all just power, right? The application of power, the nuance of it, the structure of it, the beneficial aspects of this stuff. So what we do, how we do, why we do, and all of those things comes out as a benefit. It helps. It's not about the destruction that your magic can cause. It's about the elevation that your magic can cause, right? So you're helping others with it. There is a through line of energy. So as they get better, you get better. As they improve, your skill also improves. So it allows us to work with these things in a different kind of format. So using things like Lingam Vitae, it opens the best possible path. Sandalwood sets the flow of energy and motion. Yucca transforms the form so that it can take the new body of whatever form it needs to survive the event. Right. So if you're going to go jump through the yucca hoop, shape-shifting magic, right? You shift into the animal, shift into the shadow form, shift into the spirit form that you need in order to be able to survive what is coming, right? It's whatever you have to do in that period. So we're looking at the event itself, right? You've got Jasmine, which creates response from the conditions. That'll be what'll connect you to the experience, and it'll elicit a response from those things. So like, instead of it just being a reality tunnel that goes nowhere, with the energies of Jasmine included in your spell, you can pull back some of that energy as well. So as one goes out, some comes back. So that way you've got to push and pull in these energies. So Tonka beans, carry your wishes. Motherwort aligns to the path of the higher self. So if you've got issues between you and your higher being that is not you, but is still you, right? It's that relationship that can help. Ginseng, it mirrors chosen energy. So if you are creating something and you want to create something with a little bit more oomph, you can add ginseng into it and it'll open it up a little bit more. It'll mirror that energy back. So it creates a bigger flow. And so is the effect that you want something that's going to be an active state, or is something that you want an inactive state? Like, it's, if without you, it is totally stable. If it can survive like the ecosystem without your involvement, that is a yin state approach. And anything you do to affect that would be yang energy, right? So think of a pool of water, right? If that water is totally flat on its surface, right? And you throw a rock into that pool, it's going to cause the ripples, it's going to cause the waves, it's going to cause disbursement of energy against the coastline and whatever within it. Now it has a new rock inside the pond. It changes the entire ecosystem, right? So the spell is the same way. When you're doing spells, most of the time, they are a yang effect, trying to stimulate yin occurrence, right? You want a specific thing to change the behavior of the entire environment around the subject that you're working on. And so if you can do that, if you can put that into unity, if you can put that into the through line of who you are, who they are, what you need, what they need, how it all comes together in the apex of creation, that is the application of techniques of power, right? You have understood every single step of the way to get to this point of the conversation. By compressing all of that into an ingredient list that you can then go through, grind down, light on fire. You've released the spirit, you've released the spell, you've released that behavior, that energy, that pull, right, into the world. So when you create it, you have created something that is entirely stable at each and every point. You know what its earthly behavior will be. You know what its airy behavior will be. You know what its watery behavior is going to be. You know what its earthy behavior is going to be. And you know in relation to the planets, and you know in relation to the stars, because you've already accounted for that by looking through your ingredient list. What ingredients will help me cause this particular outcome? What ingredients will help me cause that outcome? What happens if I put these two things together, right? It's the I wonder what would happen if statement. So if you can seek for those questions, you'll be able to seek for the development of your spells. And so as you go through the yang state of the earth, it's practical, it's realistic, it's thorough, it's productive, it's yin state, it's unimaginative, it's obsessive, it's compulsive, it's perfectionism, it's rigid, it's dullness, it's unyielding, it's sluggish, right? Air, it's yang state, it's practical, realistic, thorough, productive, methodical, systematic even, ambitious, steady, patient. Yin state of these things is, ooh, that's a misprint. I need to fix that. So yang state of air, it is stable in its thoughts. Its yin state is unimaginative and obsessive. Similar to earth. It's the stuff in the mind more so than the stuff on the body. The fire is the creative and expressive, it's confident. The yin state is willful, arrogant, and insensitive. The water state in its yang way is open, it's sensitive, it's unifying. Its yin state is emotional, it's amorphous and lacking shape. It's too wishy-washy, there's no substance to it. So as they go back through and they do spells and they do all of these different things, there is not a flow through with that energy. There just isn't. So as you go through and you create or recreate as a result of those things, what it is we're doing, why it is we're doing it, how it is we progress these things, that is the next step of what it is we're doing, right? Why it is we're doing it, and the means by which we're doing it. So as we come through and we see the fire, we see the energy, we see the behaviors that we're looking to do and manipulate and modify, there's the questions that you can ask yourself, right? What did I do wrong? What did I do right? This is why you need to create spell records. Creating spell records will be the thing that gets you to move your needle faster as far as what gets your work accomplished. So thinking about your evocations, thinking about the implementation of your spell work and its patterning is going to be a game changer for you. And so what do I mean by this? Well, I mean, what you use, why you use it. As the child to the mother, what is the child but the product of the union between the mother and some other energy? So are you looking at it from the child's perspective, or are you looking at it from the mother's perspective? As the child to the mother, so the mother to the child, right? As the river to the sea, are you looking at it as the sea? Are you looking at it as the point where the sea blends to the river? Are you looking at it as the river? Are you looking at it as the river's head, where it comes from in the mountains and begins to flow towards the sea, right? The rising and the setting. Is it coming and is something going, right? So when you use things like meteorites, when you use trinitite, fulgurite, tektites, lava, moldavite even, chit, when you use those ingredients, those are elements of flux. They are things that were made because of the will that made it change, the interaction that caused the change. So you can use lightning stones, fulgurite, grind them down, add them to your spellcraft. You can do that. And it creates the lightning bolt effect. Like you can throw a spell and it zaps like lightning because it disrupts the energy between, right? And so through that disruption, you create new opportunities. By that new opportunity, something might break, but it will allow you to regain that sort of engagement. It will allow you to apply in different sort of way. So as you do these things, as you create these things, you get a better interaction with them. You get a stronger implementation from them. So you have that available as well, which makes it fun. So then, getting a little bit more in depth in the path working, as knowing what the gates are going to do to you is one of the most important things that you can actually do when it comes to studying spellcraft, studying the application of spellcraft. Because as you do and you go through it, it is that type of understanding of this behavior will cause this result. It will cause it in me, it will cause it in the environment, it will cause it for my subject, it will cause it for my target. Like whatever the subject of the spell is, meaning what is its purpose, right? Not who it's going to, the subject of why you're doing it. Whatever your subject is, there is an energy that moves inside that subject, regardless of your influence of it. Okay? So when you use it to apply to a target effect, then it changes. Once it leaves your little decompression space, your divided sphere, your world of your own creation inside your ritual circle, and it goes after somebody else, once it does that, there's a behavior change. There's a state change. It then moves into an active form of whatever it represents, or it has to become a yin state to whatever it represents. So that way, as it goes and does whatever it is, it manifests accordingly, right? And so again, the Gnostic method is your understanding of what those things are going to be. And this is why you journal everything down, is so that way, as you keep accurate notes, you don't sound like a fucking loony, okay? Because the last thing we need is a bunch of more magicians thinking they're fucking loonies. So please please use this stuff carefully. Now, the creation of gates requires the use of glyphs. Glyphs and sigils are different. Glyphs are repeatable. Those are reusable. Sigils are once-offs. Okay? An array is the container for the glyph. So if you were able to follow through some of the work in the Grimoire of Arts, hopefully you have a copy of this so far. Yay for that. That you get the opportunity to work with these energies and apply these energies in a much more robust kind of way, where it'll actually go and show you what designs to use. They'll cause different kinds of effect, right? So I've got this one here, which has leather on the backside and the ingredients on the front, right? So depending on how this one is used with the seal of ingredients, the herbs that are behind it, the Pythagorean number squares and things like that, it draws that energy up. It creates the singularity in place of not having one. So as you use the arrays, yeah, it becomes your altar point. That becomes where you focus your magic. So when I'm talking about creating a singularity, I'm talking about that apex there. That's the singularity. So when all the stuff sits in motion, when all the jars are sitting in their places, when all of the fires are burning for this part of creation, right? So it would be like that. And then it would be like this. So that would sit on top of the spell like so. Right? And then the elemental behavior jars, depending on what it was that was being conjured, would be in those right spaces around the outside. So that way, when it's used, what it's being used on is safe, contained, and it's all there. It exists. It is the compression of that space. So that way, when we do something like putting the fire urn inside of it, we now have the means by which we can do some conjurations, right? So when we think of the material that we use, why we're using that material, and we understand that the narration of that material as it moves into different spells, as it moves into different applications of those spells, they're going to change. Like, this is why it's really, really important if you're doing general work that you don't have a target listed. Like, you do not do it for a specific person. Because free will not only is a bitch, two, you don't know everything that's going on in that person's life. And throwing energy at someone, it can work, but it can work in a way that you don't want it to. Okay, that's a big one. So as you make it work, as you make it create, as you splice it down into its myopic applications, which we've already covered, you know what your energy is going to do. You know what the behaviors are going to do, right? It's when your clients start reacting to them, that's going to be the wild card. How are your clients going to react to that? How are the people that are going to come into your ecosystem going to react to that? And that's what the question is when you're creating these kinds of workshops, when you're creating these kinds of experiences, right? And you're testing your magic, you're testing your own stuff against someone else's life, right? So it's like me creating this workshop for you, you creating a workshop for somebody else, applying these methods of the energy comes from these planets, the energy comes from those planets. There is a higher motivation behind my method of work, my methods of operation, right? So as it comes through and into the application phase, what is it that you resonate with? What is it they resonate with? What are those connecting links? What are those connecting understandings? Because if you can do that and you can create those connections, then you have the means by which you create the links to the spell. You link the spell to the ingredients, the behaviors, the expression, what you feel, why you feel it, and how they're supposed to feel, how they're supposed to take it, how they're going to interact with it, right? So you create from below, through you, up and out, right? While you're pulling down and in. So as you pull the energy down and through you, you're pulling it simultaneously up and out of you. So both come to a head right where your fire is, right where your water is, right where your earth is, right where the areas that you scatter it into, right? So again, glyphs are reusable. Glyphs are going to be what is on the side of this urn. So these are expressions of the path of fire to each planet, to the planet, from the planet, and on the planet, of all of them, actually, because this has the 7 symbols on it. So it's one for every part of the planet. So it's the earth, or sorry, it's the fire of Venus, Mars, Mercury, all of those planetary fires. So all of the different behaviors of fire, that urn represents, because it's got all of the glyphs made in the right kind of ink that attach to the whole thing, right? So it puts those magics into whatever I'm burning by proxy. So as the heat expands, as the glyphs get hot, they represent fire. As that stuff triggers, it's an alchemical composition. So it creates that catalyst of go, set to motion, right? It'll allow me to use those energies to form a complex, more robust, it's like a Rubik's Cube of energy. It takes on one of the Platonic shapes. And so it becomes three-dimensional. It gives a time, it gives an expression. So again, in the book, you'll find this symbol here, this one. That represents a flow of a gate of time. So does exactly what I'm talking about. So that shape is what I use for creating that kind of thing. So when I'm folding space open through the relationships, that's what those glyphs represent, those arches and those curves. They aren't just sacred geometry for no reason. Those are opening, those are polarizing, those are the split and the space between, right? It's the balancing between your extremes and your not extremes, and the community that you get to create as a result of blending that energy into your spell and having that spell interact with the rest of the world. So you're creating community by adding a new member of energy to the community, to the whole. So as you do that, it grows, it shifts, it changes, it goes the way you want it to, or it doesn't, depending on if you don't want it to. But that's how it has the effect. And so through doing that, it really is a fantastic way to apply that kind of spell technique into your manifestation when you're structuring it together. So when you are doing your pre-spell checklist, right, you're getting ready to cast it. You already built the thing. You know what elements and what arrangements and what ingredients are going to be important, what you need to bring together, okay? We've already covered that. Now, what we haven't covered is the records of what to do, what to keep, what to develop from that, right? So you've got the date of the spell's creation. When did you first have that idea? What was it that gave you that ideation, right? What was it that caused that idea of a spell to come into being, right? So when you write it down the first time, what's the date of writing, okay? What is your presumed date of casting? What is it that you're going to do that'll allow you to cast your spell, cast your magic, create your spell, create your magic in a way that works, right? And what I mean by works is, how does that spell fit into your life? How is the energy that you're going to channel into your life or into the life of somebody else, how does that work for you or for others? And what is its state? What are the planets that are ruling the information? What are the behaviors of those planets in that time for that information? That's what you keep a record of. This is why you date things. This is why you can go back and look at the interactions between you and the ingredients, right? Describe while you're using every ingredient. Yeah, I know it's tedious. I know it's a long process, but you've already done all the research. Now you're just putting it into a record book like this thing. So this is the record book for the thaumaturgic craft. I use those for spell restoration, like spell observations, the pre-spell formats and things like that. So I just started doing that as opposed to using my composition notebooks, because the composition notebooks, there are just too many of them. This is specific for the spells that I'm creating. I figured, why not? I know what questions I need to ask, and I generally know how many ingredients I use, so I'll have a space where I can write these things. So demonstrating the ingredients, like what the ingredients are supposed to do, what animal, what stones, what herbs, what trees, which behaviors you're trying to get to have done for each of those. What are the planets of each? And how much does it cost? That's a part of magic that a lot of people don't know, is that when you're writing spells, there is a cost to them, a monetary cost. How many hundreds of dollars does that ingredients, shapes, time, blends, whatever, cost? Is it 50 cents a teaspoon? Is it $2.50 a teaspoon? Is it $150 for a goddamn ounce? Sorry for but yeah, like that stuff gets expensive. That stuff gets really expensive. And so it adds up. And so your ingredients become worth more. Your spells become worth more. You're investing in your magic. You're investing time, your time, whatever it did to get you to earn that money so that you have the means by which you can go and implement these spells, right? Like that's part of it. It's like, what do you have to do to afford them? What do you have to do to make sacred about them if you're just purchasing the ingredients without growing them yourself, without having the relationship of your time, your energy, your blood, sweat, and tears into the land that you're growing these things out of? What happens then, right? What do you have to do? You have to pay for it. How do you pay for it? Money. Well, money is earned by time. Time in exchange for the ingredients balances out how many things that you'll be able to pull together for your spellcraft, right? Are you working with the right kind of energy? Are you working with the right kind of people? Are you in the right kind of job, right? All of that stuff goes into how much your ingredients cost, how much of each they cost, and what is the emotional cost to using those ingredients? Are you excited to use those ingredients? Are you terrified to use those ingredients? What's going on where you can apply them in different ways, right? And again, it's all about using that higher state of being, using that higher application of thought, so that as you go and as you build, these are the kinds of applications that you can do with those ingredients, right? And so as you go through and as you have the cost per ingredient, what is the actionable follow-through? So this is the pre-spell creation. What is the follow-up action that you're going to do, right? So if you've got the spell to get a job, for example, right? So you do spells to get work. Well, what is the physical action that you have to go do to get work? Do you have to go put in a resume somewhere? Do you have to go put in an application somewhere? Are you going to figure out a new industry to work in? Whatever that situation is going to be, that is the means by which you can do it. That is the foundation which you can do it. So that as you serve your people, as you create with your people, as you develop with your people, and by your people, I mean your spirits, the environment around you, you get action that you do, and their blessings follow that up, right? You do a tangible action, you follow it up with a spiritual action, there is an entrainment. It is a physical change. It is a physical transformation, so that these things become viable. These things become useful, user-friendly, stable, creative, right? And that's your pre-spell creation checklist. So again, date of creation, what you're creating, the description of the use of the methods that you're using, and the type of ingredients that you use. What component selections did you use? What were they? How much of each did you use? What was their order? What was their cost? What was the action that you took to get this thing going? So what you can do is you do a post-spell creation. Now you've cast the spell. Now it's out in the world, right? And you're going to use it for something. What are you going to use it for? Are you going to use it for a job? Are you going to use it for raising up a spirit? whatever it is, what happened? What date did it start happening? What time did you notice? What in the environment did you experience? What in the environment did other people experience? And what is it with the subject of that spell that they experienced? Did they experience it in the same way that you set it out to be? Or did it go different? Did it go funny on you? Was there some kind of outcome that isn't otherwise available to get you to understand or apply these kinds of methodologies? So that way, what you're developing, how you're developing it, for what, again, it comes back to the cycle of why, how, what happened. So if the more you can understand, the more you can study how your work is affecting a experience somebody has, is affecting the means by which your experiences are demonstrated in order to be able to pull off intangible manifestation. What do I mean by intangible? I mean, you're not involved in the process. You created a spell, you sent it off, it's doing its thing. They're going to experience everything. They're going to experience the full manifestation. They're going to experience secondary manifestation to their friends or family. And they're probably going to come whining back to you saying, oh my God, my life is falling apart. And then 2 weeks later, they're like, oh my God, my life is perfect, right? It's like that. That's what magic does. It'll change the environment in accordance with your will. So that's how we do that. And so the physical actions they take, if you did a love spell, not judging, I've done a few. If they're doing a love spell on their person and they were supposed to not be a cheating hoe bag, did they cheat? Did they step outside of what they were doing? Did they go against your recommendation? Did they go with your recommendation, right? Like I've had to fire clients before because it's like, fuck you, you're crazy. Like just straight up fucking nuts. Whereas with others, it's like, how can I serve them more? How can I serve them deeper? Because in that way, it gives the means by which deeper communications can occur. Deeper applications can also occur. So how you do these things, what physical actions that you're taking, what are the narratives of the outcome? Did it go the way that you planned it out? Did it go in relation to that order of spells directly to your purpose? And if it did, awesome, gangbusters, great. If it didn't, what went wrong? What can you go back through and track? What planets or what planetary behaviors does your spell replicate? What did you observe? What was the zodiac application? What was it to looking at it from the lens of the elements, to the lens of the animals, to the lens of the different trees, to the different plants, to the different spirits, to the different demons, to the different angels, to the different gods? You go through that entire list and you figure out if your spells manifested and you got what you wanted, but it didn't come about the way you wanted. What happened? What prevented that action? So that you can modify it. And then you can make modifications to it. And you can try the spell again. Or you can scrap that spell and you say, no, never again. But keep your records of it, because the records of it are good, because it will remind you of what you should not be doing or how to do it. So this way you get into the depth of it. You get into the more rigid applications of these things. So as you go through and you create, it makes it easier to be part of the creation, right? So you open the gate, you've got the manifestations, you've got those understandings, and they are coming to pass. And so as they come to pass, how are they being applied? How are you applying them in physical, tangible action, right? You lit the candle, you did the spell, but you also have to go look for the job. You have to go out and do something. You have to follow it up with specific physical actions that are made to replicate what it is you're trying to accomplish. So as you go and you develop spellcraft, as you develop the means of manifestation, what you're doing, it isn't evil, right? Why you do it isn't. What you do with it can be. Here's what I mean by that. Like I said, this is about black magic today, right? When you're doing stuff that fucks up somebody else, okay? There is only a couple of occasions when that is actually not a bad thing. One is if they don't stop being violent towards themselves or someone else, and they need to be stopped. 2 is if they are going after people they have no business going after because they are petty. So if they start hexing everybody just because they can, that's not good. If they are violating, desecrating the dead, that's no good. If they are using their witchcraft or their power or their authority or to instill fear and to instill evil and to apply their faith in a violent way, they are dangerous, right? It's the most interesting thing about the Holy Bible, right, is that not only is it a fantastic book of spells, but it also has a very specific message, right? You can have power, you can be a saint, you can be a miracle worker, you can do all the things that you need to do, but understand that that power, that energy, that flow through isn't yours. You are the vessel for it. You are the vessel for the Holy Spirit. You are the vessel for the divine. You are the unity in form of creation. And if you try to say anything else, then you'll be labeled as the Antichrist. Then you'll be labeled as evil. Then you'll be labeled as someone who's dabbling in the dark things. But you can go to church and you can do the laying on of hands and do the miracle healing and all the blessings and all the theurgic compliments, right? You can do that. But it's the way you frame it. So did you frame it properly? Did you test on it properly, right? So if you did and you're using it to hurt people, if you're using it to do very bad things, then that's not good. You want to be able to do good things with it. You want to be able to move it from, I'm really mad and pissed off and I hate this person, to I'm not going to have a life where I have to deal with that person, right? You're better off, they're better off. It's an easier form of balance. So that way what you do and how you do it goes to your character. It's developmental instead of environmental. You choose versus being chosen to. Instead of you choose to be you, or instead of be abused by evil things, instead of being violated by whatever bullshit is going on at the time. Like you can choose these things, or you can have them chosen for you, right? Like if people would take the time to understand the words and the meaning that's said or been done in the past, even if they took more time to understand what it is they're doing and how it is they're approaching their magic, or how it is they're approaching their spirituality, and how it is other people approach their spirituality, that they realize that everything is being served with a need, right? So if you're taking coffin nails and you're nailing somebody's footprints with them so that they walk with pain, or if you're throwing a jackball into their property line to fuck up their cookies, right? They probably did something that they pissed you off, right? But it doesn't have to come to that. And it's sending evil out to cause more evil. That's just sad. So while it's edgy, while it's that, oh yes, the secrets of the dark arts, yes, you can conjure a demon, right? With all of these methodologies that I've told you about, you can conjure more than just a demon. You can really get into the nuts and bolts of how creation works when you start applying these kinds of methods. So as you go through and as you create in relation to these things, into these principles, and through these principles, you have the means to do so much more. Like you really can do all sorts of crazy shit. Absolutely, you can do crazy shit. So when you're considering the next level of application, when you are creating from that level of, this is what I have, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to do it with, this is why I'm going to do it with these things and not these things, it's because you start developing an affinity towards behavior, right? You'll start to understand that those people that behave like that, you want nothing to fucking do with, right? What do I mean by that? I mean, drug addicts. You don't necessarily want a drug addict to be around you. You don't want someone who's a lying, cheating sack of shit to be around you. You don't want someone who is violent. You don't want someone who is too peaceful. Whatever it is that you don't want, you don't have to have. By doing this, by creating this, by curating this, you're giving yourself the means and the means and the medium through which this is expressed. So you're doing it in the spells form. You're doing it with prayer that's actively going to change the way the world works. You are inviting God into the moment. You are bringing in these higher energies that are not of you. They are of nature. And so therefore they are of God, or they are of a higher power, of that particular expression of a god or a demon or a spirit or a jinn or a fairy or whatever it is that is not your own consciousness that you have invited into your space to help you facilitate that thing which you just made. If that's not just an animation spell of grave dirt and herbs to create a new spirit, to open up the way for a new thing that's never been born before, that's why you need to have the traditions. That's why you need to have a community. That's why you need to have the cultural attachments to keep you from allowing those wandering spirits or those things that you just created to be negative, to be dangerous, to be unstable, to be chaotic, right? These are the kinds of things that you need to stabilize in order to produce better results and outcomes. So that as you produce those better results and outcomes, you get a stronger level of magic, you get a deeper level of connection, you get that higher state of being. So as you serve and how you can be served by the thing that you created, it's within balance of your character. It's within balance of the environment that you want to live in. It's like, don't shit where you eat, right? You want to create a space of separation, but at the same time, through that separation, you also want it to be peaceful. You want it to be smooth. You don't necessarily want to have the violent outburst, right? Sure, those could exist. Sure, absolutely. But that's not the point. The point is not to be evil with the stuff. The point is to go through it, to use it, to utilize it, to understand what we're doing with it, and then apply it in a different way, right? So if you're doing all of these things in your faith community, in your spiritual practice, in your development of what your spells are, this methodology converts into sales. What are your sales methods? What are your business methods? What are your behaviors in relation to those things as they work through, as they create through, as they work around different ingredients in order to be able to cause the kind of manifestation that you want, right? So by your creation, you have created. And you have created something stable and marvelous. So that is essentially the spell's creation. Now, how about we get to cooking, right? So today is going to be a lot of fun. So we take our ingredients and we light them on fire, right? So we've got the urn of conjuration. And not use that one. We'll do a little bit of wishing powder. And a little bit of the spell to cause a situation change while untethering bad attachments. Okay. So with these two spells, into the fire pot. Into the fire pot. Out from the fire pot. Where did I put that piece of stick? I just had my stick. I was playing with my stick. My stick. Okay, so with the stick, using a array, right? In this case, I'm going to use Mars. I'm going to use Moon for reflection. And I'm going to use Venus, right? So that which is at odds cannot be, and that which is will be. So the path of life, the path of reflection, and the mind to it all changes. Here I evoke, here I create, here we open the way. Let the spirit be by the words that I say. So if I wish I could get you to see the inside of this thing, but that becomes a spirit totem for a while it's hot. So we said, pull energy up and around. So that becomes the foundation of spellcraft. So that as you bring in the energies between you and the planets and the fire and the ingredients of the fire, that the smoke that gets released becomes the spirit, becomes the force of nature that we seek. So that as it transforms from fixed states to fluid states, from form and non-form, everything exists in balance. Everything exists in a unity with the spell, the masculine principles, the reflection of the principles, the path of life for the individual who's making the wish, right? So we create it, we do it, we demonstrate it, we have the compression, we're using all of the ingredients accordingly. Everything has been prepped and pre-planned day by day by day by day. A little bit of this, a little bit of that. By the end of it, you've got stuff. You've got a spell that works. You've got a relationship to ingredients that otherwise would be separate, but you're bringing them together over days, over months, over years. And as you do that, as you compress those energies into form, it'll increase the rate of your manifestation. It'll increase the rate of your connection to those ingredients. And likewise, it will cause interesting results when you are applying those compressions to your life or to the life of others. So that as I take the ingredients here and go scatter them into the tree outside, it engenders new life. It's changed form once from fixed matter to fluid matter because of the alcohol, into fire, then into air. So I moved it through the four elements, through its four states, right? It's wet, dry, hot, cold, right? So by doing that, it changes up the meaning. It changes up the application, and it seeks to go through and cause those kinds of changes of the environment. And so when I write out what's in this book, right? So I take the thaumaturgic craft, right? And so for this one, its pre-spell formations are, the date of casting it is 11/26. The date of creation was 11/26. Description of that. The description of expected manifestation on this one is that the wish stability of all right. Thank you for your patience. So it is that the wish for stability of my life comes to pass in a timely manner through the best protections from the negative attachment. So it severs the bonds of negative attachments and it invites new bonds. Spell components used. On fire. So that array was made on 11/1/21. The ingredients are used week 1. What was that? Change the situation to change situation untether attachment. And then week 1 blend 5 is which. So while it's not the sexy time, it is the writing time. So take out your notebooks, write out your spells. While you're still in state, you can continue to use the component listings. You can get really specific if you choose to, and write down like, what is week 1 blend 2? What is week 1 blend 5, right? Those are the things that I've done for the Hidden Haven group. That's the stuff that's for the interaction with the spells and the ingredients, right? So it's separate spells, 4 or 5 ingredients each, applied from one master list in a different way. So it all comes back to what I've been doing and demonstrating in the public group to what is behind closed scenes, so to speak, behind closed doors, is the writing of it, is the creating of it, is the thoughts and the mechanics behind it. So as we go and we create our spells, we understand the physics behind it. We understand the movement of energy between the fixed and the simple, right? We understand why it's doing what it's doing, and where from up there we're getting it, or where from down there we're getting it, or wherever we are in relation to the planets, in relation to our manifestation. So from that, we can only get into what components were used. So once we cast the spell and we listed our components in the book, we're done until it manifests. And then we do the start date for the manifestations. Then we do the end date for the manifestations. Then what happened to the environment? And then what happened to the people in the environment, right? What happened to the subject of the spell, right? What happened after the changes to that subject occurred? You know, what did you cause the effect? What did you see, or what did you use to cause the effect? Did it match the manifestation? And if not, what error was present, right? Why did you cast the spell? What emotions did you feel during casting? And what emotions did you feel after casting? What did you eat or drink before casting? What did you eat after? What did you drink after? What day of the week did you cast the spell on? What day of the week did you notice the manifestation? And what was the order of the casting? How was it done each step of the way? Right? Like this gets detailed into that, so that as you create, as you cultivate that relationship between you and the natural world, you can go through this you can balance this out so you don't have to hate on anybody. You don't have to hate on anything. What you do, why you do it, and how you do it, it's all in record. So that way what you're doing and how you're doing it is in front of you. And if somebody ever has a question of, oh, what was that one spell you did that one time? You have a record place for it. You know where it is because your records are kept, right? And so by collecting your spell records, you can improve different spells. You can improve different connections to those energies that you wouldn't otherwise use. So you can have an entire set of books that you can go through and write Grimoire spells like this one. This is the methodology I use for everything I teach from, right? Where the books behind me and the ones over here are all the spells I either use professionally or they're in books that are just too big to fit on the shelf, right? So as we move forward with the process and the development of all of these things, I look forward to seeing what you do on your journey. Thank you for staying with me, my friends. Until next time.